From courtside of the virtual hardwood, it's the NLSC Podcast, a weekly show for basketball gamers and hardcore hoopheads. And with you once again, I'm joined as always by my co-host Derek, aka D4 Derek, obviously I enjoy everything we talk about here on the NLSC Podcast. It's why we get on here every week to chat about basketball and basketball video games. But I'm particularly fond of this topic, having written a number of Friday 5 articles about it, including part 5 in the series last week. It's a fun topic to dive into, so please, tip us off.
Yeah, so our main topic today has to do with retirement. No, I'm not talking about Andrew and I, though we are getting up there in age. We're going to be discussing retired players who we think could make comebacks and still produce in today's game. But we will also list comebacks that we wish we could have seen in the past. This topic was inspired by Fred VanVleet, who tweeted about the Phillip Rivers comeback and asked basketball fans which retired players they thought could still produce at a high level today. So we're actually going to start with past situations in NBA history where a comeback was possible for a recently retired legend. But first I want to go with Wilt Chamberlain's potential comeback in the 1980s. Wilt Chamberlain had several near comebacks in the 1980s, most notably when the Cleveland Cavaliers and Philadelphia 76ers in 1982 and the New Jersey Nets in 1986 offered him contracts, but he declined, feeling it was a publicity stunt or too late to be competitive, though he remained in incredible shape and even played against future stars like Magic Johnson in pickup games, showing he could still dominate in his 40s. And apparently those pickup games were something to marvel at. Apparently he was swatting everything. Apparently he was still incredibly dominant. Apparently he was still incredibly athletic. And some of the names that were in those pickup games were people like Magic Johnson, James Worthy, Bernard King, Byron Scott, and AC Green. And I think Wilt Chamberlain's team, according to the articles that I've read, he was paired with UCLA freshmen. But yeah, even at that age, in his mid-40s, Andrew, apparently he was still incredibly dominant and in great shape.
Remaining a freak athlete into his 40s. As you said, so many stories about that. And look, pickup games are not the same as regular NBA games, obviously, but again, based on those stories, it does sound like he had a decent chance with that lingering athleticism, if you will, to still play in the NBA. It was just a case of getting his conditioning back, getting into the right situation. And I was reading an article from, I think it was 2016, by Jackie McMullen on ESPN.com, talking about this, because I've done some research, obviously, talking about comebacks that would be fun to play with in basketball video games for the Friday 5. And she notes that one of the issues that players have is knowing when to step away. And that also includes taking on a smaller role. Would Wilt Chamberlain be willing to take on that smaller role for a team in the 80s? It's all what if, all hypothetical, obviously. But he was taking on that smaller role as far as the scoring load towards the end of his career. So it might have been feasible. He might have been able to do it, and it really would have been interesting to see.
Yeah, if you think about it, his last season in the NBA was in 72-73. And he had basically become more of a distributor at that point. Now, obviously, he would still command attention on the offensive end and insert himself on that end as well when needed. But, like you stated, he wasn't averaging 50 points a game anymore. He wasn't averaging 30 points per game anymore, etc. So, if you think about it, he had been retired for roughly 9 years when teams started offering him contracts at age 45. And the 76ers attempt to get him on the squad is the most intriguing to me. So the 76ers front office was scrambling to enhance their front court depth before the start of the 1982 playoffs, especially as then center Daryl Dawkins had recently suffered a broken leg. To sweeten the deal, they offered the Big Dipper a $500K salary, which was a hefty sum compared to his era. Likely enticed by that and being physically prepared, Wilt was also emotionally moved by the idea. Wilt stated, "I still have a lot of thinking to do, people to talk to. This is one of the biggest decisions I will ever make. I don't want it to be a wrong one." And he stated that to the United Press International. So he did consider it. And it looks like what would have happened is he would have been signing on for the end of the season and the playoffs. But what's super intriguing about that to me is that what if it went well? What if he did come back and play really well at the end of the season, plays in the playoffs, finds out that he, is physically able to do this and still be a, high impact player.
Still has
and
it,
then he now has another summer to get himself even in better shape, right? Now he knows what he's up against. And now he's on that 82-83 team. And maybe they still get Moses, right, in free agency. And now Wilt is backing up Moses. And how awesome would that be for video games, obviously, for classic teams. But how awesome would that have been to see with Wilt Chamberlain out there with Moses Malone and Julius Erving and Bobby Jones and Andrew Toney and Maurice Cheeks, etc. That is fascinating to me. That would have been just absolutely awesome. And then the New Jersey Nets offer in 1986. The Nets offered him at age 49 a $362K contract for the final 7 games and playoffs. Wilt turned it down, calling it a joke and a marketing ploy, even though he was still physically capable. But can you imagine a 49-year-old Wilt Chamberlain coming back and playing on those mid-80s Nets? That would have been wild. But again, the 76ers case, yeah, how cool would that have been if he had actually come back?
How many historical narratives would it change if he came back and was dominant in his mid-40s or even late 40s? Absolutely. And of course, there are a couple of other offers that I've heard about and read about because teams were trying to get Wilt out of retirement kind of since he retired. Of course, had to go to the ABA. The NBA blocked him from being able to play in the ABA in 73, so he took the coaching gig, which he wasn't really suited for, and so stepped away from the game. But of course, these offers came along afterwards. Apparently, the Bulls and Suns tried to get him in the 70s. Cleveland reached out in 1979, were supposedly kind of close to making it happen, but they very carelessly delivered the offer to his home, and it was a windy day, as the story goes, and apparently the papers blew all over the yard. That didn't really impress him, so he didn't accept the offer, didn't go any further than that. But so many intriguing what-ifs with a Wilt comeback.
Let's just not forget that, Wilt Chamberlain, over 7 feet tall, 7'1", listed at 275 pounds, was just known for being incredibly strong and a gifted athlete. And I wouldn't be surprised if he would have still been able to play at a high level in the 80s. In fact, early on in his younger days, he was an Olympic level athlete. So yeah, huge what ifs there. So Andrew, what's a comeback from the past that you would have liked to see?
Well, Derek, I hate to be predictable, but at the same time, I don't want to be unpredictable just for the sake of it. So I'm going to talk about a shooting guard for the Chicago Bulls who was picked 3rd overall. That's right, Derek. I'm talking about Ben Gordon and the possible comeback he could have made in 2017. Going to the D-League, now G-League, of course, signing with the Texas Legends, having some pretty good performances with them, showing that he still had it. And yes, that is the minor league, that is the D-League. It doesn't necessarily mean that you will still be able to produce at that NBA level. But he was still young. He was still in his early 30s when he left the NBA, when he got cut by the Warriors, the defending champion Warriors in 2015, and that basically brought an end to his career. Now, he's gone on to talk about some of the mental health struggles he's had, so obviously that impacted his comeback attempts. But Ben Gordon, with his shooting ability, tailor-made for the modern NBA, the changing NBA in the mid to late 2010s, I wish he could have made a comeback. Would have loved to have seen him have one more run with the Bulls, a bit of a farewell run with the Bulls. Not like they were really going anywhere at the time. They certainly could have used his shooting. Yeah, kind of got forced out of the league like that, very unceremoniously, after some down years with the Pistons, leaving the Bulls in a very disappointing way. The fact that they just let him walk for nothing, that they didn't even negotiate extensions properly with him when they were coming up. Just very disappointed with Garpax, the way they handled that whole situation. But yeah, I would have loved to have seen Ben Gordon come back circa 2017.
His last season in the NBA was 14-15, played 56 games, averaged 6.2 points per game, but was still a strong three-point shooter at 36.1%. He was a 40.1% three-point shooter for his career on 3.9 attempts per game. And he averaged at his peak 21.4 points with the Bulls in 06. 07. I know that he is one of your favorite players of all time, if not in contention for being your favorite. And his game, just how he could light it up from beyond the arc, just the way he played the game, I think he would have been even better today. I think you would agree. Or even in the late 2010s when the shift really happened, where teams are taking more and more threes and whatnot. Imagine, Ben Gordon, a healthy Ben Gordon, helping you spread the floor and whatnot. So, no, I agree. I think that's a good one.
And if he's healthy, there's no reason that he couldn't play into his 40s, being that spot-up shooter. That is a role that he could absolutely fulfill in today's NBA.
So next comeback that I would have liked to see was Sean Kemp in 2006. Barkley laughed this off. I want to say that Kemp was around 37 years old. There was a segment, I want to say it was on Inside the NBA, where Barkley was saying, who really wants Sean Kemp? There's nobody out there that would take Sean Kemp, at this time. There's other players that teams could look at, all of that stuff. But he did attempt a comeback that year. And I guess it was a pretty determined effort. He had retired in 2003, but he had lost significant weight and worked out for teams like the Denver Nuggets and the Dallas Mavericks. Apparently he was motivated by personal issues and a desire to end his career the right way. But despite his efforts, no NBA team offered him a contract, effectively ending his career despite later playing overseas and trying again. But I find the footage that I saw intriguing of him. I want to say he was working out with the Nuggets in that footage. He had lost a lot of weight. They say that he went from 300 pounds down to 270. He looked even more slim than that in the footage that I saw, but he was moving well up and down the court. They showed him blocking some shots, all of that stuff. I'm sure you remember that footage of him with his attempted comeback. But it's even more intriguing just thinking about who he may have been playing with if he had come back in his late 30s. Again, great video game team, but it would have been fun seeing him get up and down the court with these guys. He attended the Nuggets Summer League camp, so he would have been with Carmelo Anthony, Marcus Camby, Kenyon Martin, J.R. Smith, eventually Allen Iverson, if that trade still happened. Sean Kemp wouldn't have affected that whole thing. So Iverson probably would have played with Kemp. And I just think that would have been a really fun scenario to look back on. And I think it would have been pretty damn cool for video games as well.
Awesome video game teams. Absolutely. I remember that comeback attempt well. I remember wishing that it would happen, that he could kind of finish his career on his terms, on better terms than going out with the Magic. And he did have some flashes of brilliance with the Magic in that last year. He did slim down a bit, but was still quite heavy, obviously. But he was in good shape, as you said, trying for that comeback for the 2006 season. The teams that he could have joined. And, of course, the Mavericks went to the finals in 2006. May have had another...
I already missed the workout, Andrew. That's the thing. He missed the workout in April 2006.
Classic Kemp.
And then, they're talking about how motivated he was, but he also missed the September 2006 workout with the Chicago Bulls, your team.
Yeah,
and,
I remember that.
Apparently, they were showing some interest, and he just missed the workout. So I know it sounds like he was motivated. He definitely looked like he was motivated in the footage that I watched, and he definitely lost a lot of weight. I don't understand these missed workouts.
Yeah, that attitude. Classic Sean Kemp, in a way, unfortunately. Not one of his finer attributes. But yeah, I remember that scheduled workout with the Bulls, because that's what inspired me to add Sean Kemp to my NBA Live 06 dynasty with the Bulls. Had a lot of fun, added him to the game in my roster update, turned down the ratings so that he would be more realistic, not prime Sean Kemp. That really added to that dynasty, made it so much more fun. So, yeah, I absolutely would have loved to have seen it in real life as well.
So what's the next past comeback you would have liked to see?
So I'm going to go with another attempted comeback through the D-League. Antoine Walker in 2010. Like Ben Gordon, another player that would be tailor-made for what the game was becoming, having those outside shooters. Another player that left the NBA quite young when you look back. If he was healthy and in shape, which he kind of seemed to be with that run with the Idaho Stampede in the D-League, that would have been really fun to see. And again, kind of like Sean Kemp, another former All-Star being able to end his career on a happier note, on his terms.
Yeah, what I remember of Antoine Walker in the G League is that towards the end of his stint with the Idaho Stampede, and he played the 11-12 season, and that was it. That he had put on quite a bit of weight. Like he'd put the weight back on. And I remember watching footage of him, and he was really struggling overall. I was just looking at his stats, and he shot 36.1% from the floor in the G League, and started 17. Yeah, and he started 17 out of 44 games. He also wasn't rebounding the ball as well at that point either. He's averaging 4.9 per game. I would agree that he looked better in 10-11 because I remember keeping an eye on it at that time. His minutes were up then. He was starting most of the games. He averaged 16 points and 6 rebounds a game. But in his last season with them, it just looked like he should hang him up at that point. And I think the thing is about Antoine Walker is I don't think he was ever a great three-point shooter. I thought that a lot of times he took threes when he shouldn't, which happens a lot in today's NBA. He should have, had his butt on the block. He should have been slashing, etc. It was really frustrating as a Celtics fan watching him sometimes because he would take a lot of ill-advised threes and he would brick a lot of them as well. However, I will say that a guy that played with Antoine Walker for a short stretch with the Boston Celtics in, the number 88 Antoine Walker mini return, Rafe LaFrentz. Rafe LaFrentz actually played 3 seasons with the Celtics. One was injured. But Rafe LaFrentz, I think, would be unbelievable in today's game. 7-footer, shot a career 36.3% from 3, only took 2.3 per game, but had, a season with Dallas where he shot over 40% from 3, multiple seasons where he shot over 38%, 39%, etc. Was quick-footed as far as going block to block, was a really good shot blocker, was really good at running the floor. He peaked in his career averaging around 14 points per game. I think that goes way up in today's NBA. I think he was a very good athlete, and I think that he would be getting better looks today, and I think he would be shooting more today, and I think that he would be a much bigger problem today for defenders and other NBA teams. So Rafe LaFrentz, I think, I think he's made for today's NBA.
Kind of in that Al Horford role, spawning up in the corners and occasionally from the top.
So my next comeback that I would have liked to see is Allen Iverson in 2013. So he had a potential comeback with the Mavericks, Andrew, that never materialized because he turned down an offer to play for their NBA Development League. It was the D League at the time, affiliate, the Texas Legends. So it goes like this. In January 2013, the Dallas Mavericks organization, specifically Donnie Nelson, the team's president of basketball operations, co-owner of the Texas Legends, extended an offer to Iverson to join the D-League team as a potential path back to the NBA. The Legends had a history of successfully helping veteran players return to the NBA. However, Iverson publicly declined the offer via Twitter, stating, "I thank Donnie and Dallas for the consideration, and while I think the D-League is a great opportunity, it is not the right route for me." At the time, Iverson, who was 37 years old and had not played in the NBA since the 2009-2010 season, still hoped for a direct return to an NBA roster to complete his legacy. Ultimately, his NBA comeback efforts in 2013 were unsuccessful, and he never played for the Mavericks or any other NBA team again. So that always bugged me because, he had been out of the league for a while. The Dallas Mavericks organization was probably like, we want to see how you're moving, right?
Yeah.
We want to see how you're playing. We want to see how you handle the D-League competition first. And, if you're moving well and playing well and you are the Allen Iverson that we want, then, we'll take you on the team. And instead of going that route to get back, he wanted to just be guaranteed a spot, right? With the Dallas Mavericks and, just automatically be thrown back in the NBA. So that was unfortunate. But again, would have been cool to see him with Dirk, right? Would have loved to see how that would work out. I would have loved to see how he was moving at that age, to see if he had matured in his older age and if his game had matured. But that would have been cool to see.
Yeah, yet another situation where it would give a future Hall of Famer, former All-Star, an opportunity to finish their career on better terms. Because, of course, he did have that comeback with the 76ers, re-signing with them in 2010, and playing a few games, having that last All-Star appearance, and that was nice and all, but of course he did step away from the team for personal reasons and didn't actually finish that year. So it would hopefully be finishing his career on better terms. And once again, a case of attitude, not wanting to go to the D-League. And you understand the ego. And this goes back to that Jackie McMullen article, that getting over that ego, becoming a role player, going through a step, like playing in the D-League, to show that you still have it, to do that workout in a competitive environment, not being willing to do that speaks volumes to any team that is interested. And it did happen the previous year as well, reportedly. According to Stephen A. Smith, the Lakers had interest in Allen Iverson during the 2012 season. Kind of at the height of Linsanity, there was interest in bringing AI to the Lakers. As the story goes, they wanted him to spend some time in the D-League. He refused, similar to the situation in Dallas, and nothing ever came of it. And again, you do understand, because he was once one of the best players in the NBA, future Hall of Famer and all that. But if you're really serious about making that comeback, and you've been out of the league for a few years, you're in your late 30s, maybe do that. Maybe put in that effort. Maybe show that you are willing to accept that smaller role and do what you need to do to get back to the NBA.
Yeah, and he might have been able to perform, right? I mean, we saw Chris Paul last year still start every game with the San Antonio Spurs in his late 30s. And, he still put up some decent numbers and whatnot. I'm not saying Chris Paul and Allen Iverson are the same player, but the point is that it's happened before, still being able to, play big roles on teams and even start and whatnot. Obviously his game was a lot about toughness and a lot about speed and, a lot about getting to the rack. So those things would be diminished at that age, those attributes that he had. But at the same time, he still possibly could have been effective. So I still would have liked to see it.
Before we go on, a reminder that the NLSC podcast comes out every week on the NLSC, ma-live.com, as well as our YouTube channel. We're also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast apps. If you're listening on any of those apps, we'd greatly appreciate a review. To keep up with the show and everything we're doing with basketball gaming in general, connect with us on social media. On Twitter and Facebook, we are the NLSC. We also have an Instagram, NLSC Basketball, and on YouTube, we're youtube.com/NBA Live Series Center. Once again, visit us at nba-live.com, where in addition to the podcast, you'll also find all of our original content, as well as our forum and modding community. So my next one is yet another tale of problematic attitude and how it derailed a possible happier ending to his career. And that is, of course, Dennis Rodman. Basically, any of his potential comebacks in the early 2000s. And he was linked to the Timberwolves, linked to the Nuggets. There was actually a documentary made in 2003 chronicling his efforts to make a comeback. And of course, he had that motorcycle accident that basically derailed that. I know he did play overseas, a few games in foreign leagues, but never made that NBA comeback. But yeah, I would have liked to have seen it, because that last run with Dallas, the one that lasted about 12 games in the 2000 season, didn't end on a great note. He was still rebounding, like in his prime, but he wasn't playing very spirited basketball, certainly wasn't a team player. Steve Nash has gone on record saying, I don't think he ever really wanted to be a Dallas Maverick. He wanted to be back in the NBA, but wasn't really all in on the team, and certainly wasn't at his best, but he was grabbing rebounds if nothing else, which is certainly what you want Dennis Rodman to do. But yeah, Dennis Rodman, such a character. I'm obviously a fan of his from his Bulls days. Would have liked to have seen one of those comebacks happen.
I saw some of the EuroLeague footage that you're talking about, and he was just hitting threes like over and over again. And I was like, wow, Rodman was shooting incredibly well when he was playing overseas. Yeah, so the Lakers' comeback in 98-99 was also short-lived, and he was butting heads with coaches and management, and he just had an overall bad attitude and whatnot. So that didn't work out either. But yeah, it would have been nice to see him maybe get a shot with a team like the Timberwolves, right? Can you imagine how much he would be even motivated by Kevin Garnett? Maybe that would have helped him out. Maybe that would have changed his attitude a little bit. Maybe that would have fired him up and whatnot. Because Kevin Garnett is a completely different personality overall than even, Kobe and Shaq and Dirk and whatnot. So would have been interesting, especially if he had gotten a shot with the Timberwolves. So my next one is Michael Jordan potentially coming back at age 50. So he never officially made a comeback, obviously, but he strongly hinted at the possibility around his 50th birthday in 2013, famously saying, "Although I'm recognized with this tremendous honor of being in the Basketball Hall of Fame, I don't look at this moment as a defining end to my relationship with the game of basketball. It's simply a continuation of something that I started a long time ago." Jordan said at the end of the speech, "One day you might look up and see me playing the game at 50. And then there were laughs. And then he said, "Oh, don't laugh. Never say never, because limits, like fears, are often just an illusion." His legendary trainer, Tim Grover, even prepared a regimen. And there's speculation he could have contributed in a limited role. But ultimately, it remained a fantasy fueled by his competitive spirit, not a reality, as he focused on his role as an owner of the Charlotte Bobcats. And there were obviously stories about him absolutely destroying the Charlotte Bobcats team around that time in practice, right? Even at that age, destroying them one-on-one. I think they talked about him running 5-on-5 with them and just playing really well. So do I think that Michael Jordan at 50 in shape could have contributed in the NBA? I'm not going to lie. Yes, I do. I think he could have, especially with the stories that I was hearing about how, he was still playing at a high level when he was playing against other NBA players. The Bobcats, sure, they weren't a great NBA team, but they were still NBA players.
Exactly.
Whether he was playing one-on-one or whatnot. So I would have loved to see that, but it didn't happen.
Yeah, I remember a lot of talk about that. Jalen Rose going out and predicting that. Him and Bill Simmons talking about their predictions for the 2014 season and suggesting that might happen. Obviously didn't. And Andre Iguodala, a little while back, revealed that supposedly MJ was mulling a comeback in 2004 after being out of the league, retired again for a year, still had that itch to play, apparently worked out with the 76ers in a session that rookie Iggy was part of. Yeah, that's an interesting what-if as well.
Wonder who he would have come back to play for.
Yeah.
Would have been the Wizards again?
I'm guessing not after the way he split with them. So.
Yeah, it would have been super interesting if he had come back and played for the Bulls. I know you would have loved that.
Sure. Speaking of Wizards MJ and comebacks around the early 2000s, all that talk about Charles Barkley possibly coming back and maybe playing for the Wizards, maybe playing with MJ, that would have been very interesting to see, obviously. Now, apparently, he wasn't doing a great job of getting into shape. The Wizards didn't have a great deal of interest, kind of fizzled out. But I remember that being a big rumor during 2000 and 2001. Of course, Chuck ended his career with that emotional comeback in the final game of the 2000 season after suffering that injury earlier in the year. What was supposed to be his farewell tour didn't go to plan, obviously. Again, could have been a better end to his career, very interesting footnote to his career, playing with MJ. Obviously, they played together on the Dream Team and on various All-Star teams throughout the years, but actually playing a full season together, if both were healthy, yeah, what a video game team.
Kobe also said that he was tempted to go play with MJ, with the Wizards, around that time. And how cool would that have been if that had happened? And, it was Kobe and MJ and Barkley comes back. What an amazing video game team that would have been. But obviously that's all fantasy and whatnot. And Kobe obviously did the right thing, staying put with the Lakers.
And also talk of Patrick Ewing possibly going there as well. Obviously ended up with the Magic for his final season. But even past their prime as they were, MJ, Chuck, Ewing, yeah, that'd be quite an interesting trio.
Why don't we just put the Dream Team together, Andrew? Why not just put the Dream Team back together?
Well, Christian Laettner
Karl
on there.
Malone.
So you got Christian Laettner on there.
Karl Malone was still playing. John Stockton was still playing. Yeah, why not? Christian Laettner was already there. There you go.
Team USA is in the nation's capital. Why not?
It would have been perfect. My last mention is Reggie Miller's almost comeback with the 07-08 Celtics. This was a serious thing. I remember seeing footage of him at the Celtics practice facility. He was getting ready. He was testing his body, all of that stuff. He was intrigued by the fact that the Celtics formed a big three with Kevin Garnett, Paul Pierce, and Ray Allen. But right before the season, he decided to decline due to his loyalty to Indiana. And that's despite working out and testing his body. But he stated about this attempted comeback, "I knew they were stacked to win a championship. It wouldn't have seemed right to be popping champagne in Boston when we, Indiana, grew up together, laughed together, cried so many tears together because we were so close for so many years. So it looks like he decided not to do it more because of his loyalty to Indiana and because he didn't think it would feel right to win a championship in Boston, and less about his body not being ready.
Yeah, I remember that. Big topic of conversation as the Celtics were loading up in the 2007 offseason. And obviously that would have been cool to see. It would have been cool to see Reggie finally get a ring, and I'm sure he would have absolutely contributed to that run. But I do respect the stance he took, that he didn't want to play for another team, that he would have only wanted to win a championship with the Pacers. I do respect that. So here's one that probably would have been of interest to you, Derek. Darryl Dawkins possibly coming back with the Celtics in 1995. There'd been some attempts to come back with the Nuggets in 1994 as well. Would have been interesting to see how he would have played, presumably backing up to Kevin Mutombo, because he entered the league as a 19-year-old, still in his early 30s when he departed the NBA in 1989, still under 40 when he attempted to make that comeback with the Nuggets in 94 and the Celtics in 1995. Again, probably not going to be the Darryl Dawkins of old. You've got the new breakaway rims, although, as he infamously said, Derek, they can still be broken. He knows how to do it. That would have been really interesting to see a star from the 70s and 80s playing in the mid-90s.
Yeah, I think the issue with Darryl Dawkins is his game was about physicality. His game was about his athleticism.
Yeah, kind of lost that.
I guess he started, people that played against him talked about how hard he would set screens, how it would hurt when he would hit them. Apparently he was one of the better screen setters of his time. His game was about throwing it down on people, playing above the rim. Even his outside shot was a jump shot, right? Where he would elevate and whatnot. And I feel like his game, probably would not have been suited for older age. And I'm not surprised that the Celtics took a flyer on him, but I'm equally not surprised that they said no, right? And he didn't make the team and whatnot. But it would have been cool to see Darryl Dawkins in Celtics green. And I have one more that I'd like to bring up. And Bill Walton hinted at this, and it would have been interesting. Apparently, after a few years off, his feet were feeling a little better, and he may have been interested to come back and play for the New York Knicks. And I want to say it was the late 80s, and be a backup for Patrick Ewing. Obviously, his career didn't end the way that he wanted to. He had an injury-riddled season in 86-87 with the Boston Celtics and couldn't be a full participant in the playoffs after that storied 85-86 season where he won Sixth Man of the Year and overall looked healthy and whatnot. But I love teams that have strong backup big men. And the thought of, Bill Walton spelling a young or primed Patrick Ewing and giving the Knicks some quality front court depth in that second unit, I think that would have been cool to see.
Yeah, and obviously, as long as he's healthy, that's what you want to see. You don't want to see these players come back and be an absolute shell of themselves. Not just less than they were, but absolutely struggling to get up and down the court. You never want to see that. And you never want to see them permanently injure themselves and really hobble themselves from trying to make a comeback when they really shouldn't, when their body really is saying, no, do not play professional basketball anymore. But if he was healthy, yeah, backing up a prime Patrick Ewing, you flash back to the 80s, Bob McAdoo backing up Kareem. And then he was on the 76ers behind Moses Malone one year as well. And then, of course, Bill Walton behind Robert Parrish on the Celtics. Yeah, that is a really cool scenario. And finally, I'll say either or both of Magic Johnson's comebacks that didn't happen. The one in 1992 that was derailed when there was that incident on the court where he was cut open and people panicked, obviously. And then the possibility of him coming back after the comeback in 1996, in 1997, halfway through the season to play with Shaq and a rookie Kobe. Now, the Lakers had to relinquish the rights to Magic to clear the cap room to sign Shaq. That was all part of that effort to bring Shaq to LA. But he could have re-signed with the team in early 1997. Would have had to have set out that first part of the season after announcing that he was retiring again. But that would have been really cool to see that intersection of eras. Even though it was rookie Kobe not playing as much, Shaq was injured for a bit of 1997 as well. But if they could have gotten them on the floor at least once for an extended stretch. Young Kobe, Shaq, Magic. How cool would that have been?
Yeah, I saw an image of Magic Johnson working out with the Lakers during the 96-97 season. In fact, he's in practice gear and driving to the hoop on Shaq. And it's unbelievable how much he had slimmed down from the 95-96 campaign. He looked like he was in incredible shape. I believe he could have been serious about it just based on looking at that photograph. He honestly, from his body standpoint, to me, he looks like he did in the early 90s, like 90, 91, in his last season. So I thought that was pretty cool to see. And yeah, that would have been awesome to see in real life. And then it would have been a great video game team.
And as a sidebar to that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar possibly coming back in 1991 for the Knicks. Recently, the NBA Cobwebs account on X posted the Pistons talking about, if he comes back, we'll certainly make a play for him as well. Not really that serious, but Pat Riley was actually apparently serious about bringing him in to back up Ewing in the 91-92 season. Kareem was supposedly at least considering it, been out of the league for a couple of years, obviously, but with Magic retiring, he felt that it would be a good story for the NBA, a positive story for the NBA, and a way to help bring awareness to what Magic was trying to do with HIV awareness. So that would have been kind of interesting to see. But at the same time, when you look at how he declined in his final season with the Lakers, getting up there in age, father time and injuries taking their toll as they do, I think it was probably for the best that Kareem didn't become a Knick. But would have been a pretty interesting visual and video game team.
Yeah, I agree. I think Robert Parrish held on too long, too. Right. It was tough seeing him in such a limited backup role with the Bulls. It was tough seeing him with the Hornets as well after he left Boston. And you know what? I don't blame any veteran player for trying to hold on as long as they can. Right. They made it to the peak of their sport and they probably want to play as long as possible. Right. But it is still tough sometimes to watch an aging player, out there and declining and struggling or getting incredibly limited minutes compared to what they used to get when they were younger. So, tough seeing Parrish with the Bulls, and I think it would have been tough seeing Kareem with the Knicks.
Absolutely, and it goes back to what Jackie McMullen wrote in that article. It is hard for players who have done this for so long, experienced the highs of being a professional athlete, to step away.
So let's get to the next part of the main topic. So recently retired players that we think could still contribute at a high level for an NBA team today. And honestly, Andrew, I don't really have anybody to name here. Dirk is done. He said that he can't even really play with his kids anymore. His feet are so bad. So, no chance of him coming back. KG hasn't played since the mid 2010s. Vince Carter looked done when he was done. I honestly can't think of any recently retired players that could really lace them up right now confidently and contribute at a high level. I will say this. I would have liked to see Jeremy Lin get another chance a few years ago.
Agreed.
When he was dominating in the G League. For example, when he was 32 in the 2021 season, he played 9 games, but, in only about 30 minutes a game, was averaging about 20 points per game, 6.4 assists, 3.2 rebounds, shooting over 50% from the field, shooting over 42% from 3 on 5 attempts a game, almost 90% from the line. He said that he could still play. He looked like he could still play. He was in his early 30s. I just think the league was done with him at that point. And it's a damn shame because there were a lot of players who were less talented than early 30s Jeremy Lin that were getting spots on NBA rosters. And getting spots on NBA rosters at his position when they weren't as good as he was. He was healthy at the time and he was ready to play. It would have been nice to see Jeremy Lin get another chance.
100% agreed. And we've talked about it before. It really is unfortunate, disheartening when the league is done with a player. They can probably still go almost definitely still go in many cases, but the league has just moved on. They want that fresh, young talent. They want to go in a different direction. They don't necessarily trust that that player can make it through the rigours of a full season, although with load management these days, who knows? Or they have had some injury problems, or whatever, or the only team that could afford them, possibly have room for them, have minutes for them, still doesn't think they'd be a great fit. Very unfortunate when the league kind of pushes out those veterans. And you understand that they want to bring in fresh talent, and if the veterans hang around too long, it can get sad, or it does take opportunities away from you younger players. But it's still unfortunate that not everybody gets that dignified exit.
Yeah, I mean, I think the NBA should be the best players in the world, right? I think that regardless of age, I think that the best players should be playing in that league. And in his early 30s, he still had a few good years left in him. I think that he could have been still a solid contributor in the league. And I saw some players on rosters that never should have made it to the NBA and couldn't give their team really anything for contributions. And they were able to stick around. So like you said, and like I said earlier, I just think that sometimes the league is done with a player and they've decided to move on.
And to your point, I think a lot of recently retired players are either battling health problems or they're just getting up there in age, and they might still be able to give you a few minutes here and there, but as far as playing at a high level, being a major contributor, that is questionable. You could throw somebody out there like Dwight Howard, who has been playing recently. Carmelo Anthony, if he's in shape and healthy, possibly could still be playing. Again, if he can accept that smaller role on a team, a bench role, maybe he can be a bit of a spark plug, a veteran spark plug for a team making a deep run in the playoffs. And of course, to that point, a Chris Bosh, who is the same age as LeBron, and I think would have the skill set to still be able to play and be a valuable contributor today. But of course, the problems with the blood clots, too much of a risk. Even in 2018, when he was looking to make a comeback, teams just didn't want to take that chance because they didn't want a tragedy to happen on the court, and he understood that, but it was still unfortunate. He did play in Goran Dragic's retirement game in Slovenia, but as far as playing a full NBA season, obviously not going to happen. But I think he possibly could, especially being a stretch four as he was.
I mean, you see some guys in the Big Three league, right? That kind of show out sometimes. I've been seeing some highlights of Jason Richardson.
Yeah,
he can still get
Joe
up.
Johnson. Yeah,
He's catching oops. He's reverse dunking and all of that stuff. But I think there's just a big difference between playing in the Big Three league and playing 5-on-5 NBA at full speed
or once-off exhibition,
and right, and more minutes and all of that stuff. You look at Jason Richardson, and the last time that he played in the NBA was 14-15. He played with Philadelphia and averaged 9 points a game and 21 minutes a game and shot under 35% from the floor. So do you really think that early 40s Jason Richardson, just because he's showing out in the Big Three league, would be able to start and be a heavy contributor on an NBA roster today? I think it's doubtful. You see guys like Amari Stoudemire too, right?
Sure.
And whatnot. I saw Greg Oden recently killing it. I think he was against Scalabrine for part of that game. But he was killing it in the Big Three league. Do I think that Greg Oden could jump on an NBA roster and contribute? No. The last time that he tried to do that in the early 2010s with the Heat, he was a ghost out there, right? He really couldn't do anything for them, and he couldn't really help them. So, that's why it's tough. I can't think of anybody else outside of some of the names that you mentioned maybe getting minutes that, could contribute at a high level right now in the league.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily translate a once-off exhibition against non-NBA players or the Big Three, 3-on-3, not 5-on-5. Absolutely. And yeah, I remember being happy to see Greg Oden back in the league, getting that second chance in the 2014 season. Had a couple of decent outings, including one against the Bulls that resulted in a Big Moments challenge being pushed through for NBA Live 14, actually. But those great moments were few and far between, and great moments is probably overselling them as well. So yeah, the level of athleticism, the skill set, and of course health absolutely factors. I will say, one that will be interesting to see, I don't think he would necessarily succeed because he's been out of the league for over a decade. His skill set, well, it could probably still work in the modern NBA because traditional bigs are still around, and he might even be able to learn to shoot. But even if he didn't, there are still some traditional bigs around. That is Andrew Bynum. He was considering a comeback as recently as 2018, and of course that's not that recent anymore, scarily. But the funny thing about that, and why I'd kind of like to see it, if only for a game, if only he came back for a single game, Derek, is if he came back today, he still would not be the oldest player in the league after being out of the league for over a decade. I think he'd be in the top 10 oldest players, but I think there's about 5, 6, maybe 7 players that will be ahead of him, including LeBron, obviously, because Bynum did come out of high school, the youngest player to ever play in an NBA game. He would still be under 40. That would be pretty novel. Him coming back after all this time, the longest time between stints in the NBA, you know, it wouldn't be akin to Wilt making a comeback in the late 70s or mid-80s for sure, but it would be novel. I'd kind of like to see it just for a game, just for the spectacle of it, for just how weird it would be to see him back in the league. But with that being said, I don't think he'd be a star.
I think the thing with Bynum is that he actually just turned 38 in October. So he wouldn't even be turning 39 until next October. But it's important to note that he had chronic knee problems.
Absolutely, yeah.
Let's see, torn meniscus, dislocated kneecaps, cartilage degeneration, which led to like surgeries, absences, just all of these issues, right? And I think that's very worth noting that he probably couldn't get out there and probably do anything. I doubt that his knees, I doubt that his knees have gotten much better as he got older.
Mine haven't.
But it would be interesting. But it would be interesting considering he hasn't played a game since the 13-14 season, where he played 2 with the Pacers. So, it would definitely be cool to see, even if it was just for one game.
11 years, or possibly 12 years between stints, would be pretty much twice as long as anybody else who's made a comeback. I think Bob Cousy probably has the record, 6 years between his Celtics retirement and that brief comeback with the Cincinnati Royals. So, again, historically significant, certainly interesting, but health-wise, ain't going to happen.
So let's get to the community responses. I asked, which retired former NBA player do you think could still produce if he came out of retirement? And in the past, some retired NBA players hinted at or tried to make a comeback. Which would you have liked to see happen? Roger Ward, Live 01 legend, stated, as in guys that could play today, Jamal Crawford, Joe Johnson, Dwight Howard, Carmelo Anthony, Darren Collison, and Chris Bosh. Obviously, Darren Collison had an early retirement, and it wasn't anything related to his health. So that's definitely plausible. Joe Johnson always keeps in great shape. I believe he's been lighting it up in the Big 3 league. Maybe he could give some NBA teams some minutes. Jamal Crawford scored 50 at age 40 when he was with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He still plays pickup. He still loves the game. Possibly he could go out there and give some teams some minutes as well. So some good choices there.
Absolutely. And of course, as we said, Big 3 and other exhibitions don't always translate to the NBA, but definitely some skilled players there. Joe Johnson did make that comeback in 2022 with the Celtics, which, again, a very fun trivia note there. The longest time between stints for a single team, over 20 years, and scoring a basket with teams that far apart. Yeah, very cool.
Even at the Live King states healthy Brandon Roy, Sean Kemp would flourish, Reggie Miller, White Chocolate, Rashard Lewis, to name a few. So I think he's stating that players that he thinks would be incredible in today's game that were retired. So like say you put prime Sean Kemp in today's game, he would flourish. Obviously Reggie Miller, Jason Williams. I think that his lower shooting percentages would be considered normal in today's NBA for his position. I think he would have more of a green light to shoot threes. I think that Jason Williams would be a much better scorer in today's NBA than he was in his time. I think that he would be given a much longer leash with his abilities in today's game. So I think that's a great choice. Rashard Lewis, obviously, 6'10" wing who can also post up, hit fadeaways, do things around the rim. But he was a really good three-point shooter, would absolutely thrive today. So I think those are some awesome choices as well.
And it is a shame that Brandon Roy's career ended the way it did. Again, chronic knee problems, a couple of injuries there. Had that comeback attempt with the Timberwolves that was scuppered after 5 games. But yeah, certainly if he could have gotten healthy, played through those issues, easier said than done with that much pain, might have been able to extend his career. Brandon Roy was a really fun player to watch back in the day. Of course, the player that kind of broke Michael Jordan and Charles Barkley's friendship. Barkley suggesting that MJ should have taken Brandon Roy over Adam Morrison. And of course, that would have still gone down in flames with Brandon Roy's health problems, but certainly, in hindsight, would have been a better pick. I do think Adam Morrison is very easy to say that was a terrible pick in hindsight. He was one of the best players coming out of college player of the year, if I recall correctly. And of course, Adam Morrison almost made a comeback with the Brooklyn Nets a couple of years after his final game, winning a couple of championships with the Lakers. So, what if there?
Adam Morrison, NBA champion. Patrick Ewing, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, and John Stockton, not NBA champions.
Dickie Simpkins, 3-time champion.
There you go. T Gentry at Bucky_T states Carmelo Anthony, Kemba Walker, Caron Butler, T-Mac if healthy, and Derrick Rose. Some recently retired players. T-Mac I'm questioning a little bit because he's been out of the game for so long now. I'm not sure that, I think he was done health-wise when he retired. It's also important to note that Tracy McGrady is 46 years old. He was born in 1979.
Yes.
So super long shot there.
There was talk of him coming back circa 2014. And I talked about this in one of the Friday 5 articles about this topic. Possibly linked to the Lakers, never really went anywhere. Not a lot of serious interest in him at the time. Again, because he was kind of done physically. But if he could have gone one more year, and of course, Kobe Bryant was breaking down physically as well at that time, coming off that Achilles injury. T-Mac and Kobe together still would have been a fun sight and a lot better in video games.
Now, this mention is something because Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf is 56 years old. But Trans Women Gaming at Layla Elby states Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf. Listen, if a 56-year-old Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf came back and produced in an NBA game today, that would be one of the highlights of my life, Andrew. I would absolutely love that. But that is a super, super long shot. I know that once again, he was producing at a high level a while back in the Big 3 league. And there was a lot of videos going around about him lighting it up. And it's like, oh, he's 50 years old, he's lighting it up and whatnot. But I'm struggling to vision 56-year-old Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, producing at a high level in the NBA today.
If he did, though, I'm just imagining Phil Jackson pointing at the TV, basically doing the Leonardo DiCaprio point at the TV. See, I told you, he's just like Steph Curry. And people really clowned Phil Jackson for that. And Jax was not saying he is as good as Curry. People were saying we've never seen anyone play like Curry. And all Phil Jackson was saying was Abdul-Rauf was kind of the prototype of Curry. Didn't say he was as good, didn't say he was as accomplished, didn't say that he could step into the NBA and dominate today at an advanced age. He was just saying, stylistically, there are similarities. But people didn't want to hear that.
There are definitely similarities. How fast Abdul-Rauf got his shot off, the way he got to his spots, the size of Abdul-Rauf compared to Curry. Kendall Gill was in an interview recently, and they asked him the 5 toughest players that he had to guard in his career. And number 2 on his list was Michael Jordan, and number 1 was Abdul-Rauf.
I saw that, yeah.
And he stated that Abdul-Rauf he did things so fast, and he got his shot off so fast. And he stated that he remembered a possession where he was told to guard Abdul-Rauf, and before he realized it, Abdul-Rauf had already scored. And he's like, what just happened? So, I see where Phil Jackson was coming from with that comparison. So that's it for responses from the community. Thank you to all those who responded to the mailbag. Interesting topic for sure, Andrew. And we'll see what happens with guys like Curry and LeBron after they retire, right? And Durant, because what's going to happen. at some point, let's say LeBron retires next year, there will be whispers of a comeback a couple years down the road.
Sure.
Right? And that stuff is always intriguing with players who, were legends or former all-stars, etc. Hinted at comebacks are always fun to think about.
Yeah, and rumours and gossip are part and parcel with sport, so there's always going to be that speculation. It's always going to be fun to talk about the what-ifs today and historically. I love this topic. There's a reason that I've talked about comebacks that would have been fun to see in video games in Friday 5 articles and counting. I've already prepared the examples for a 6th article that will be coming out sometime next year, Derek. So, yeah, absolutely love what-ifs, love NBA history, as you do too. This is always fun to dive into. But with that being said, that has brought us to the end of this week's show. Thank you for tuning in, and a reminder that you can catch us every week on the NLSC, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, both we and the NLSC are on social media, so Derek, go ahead and plug the handles.
You can reach me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at D43G and at D4384. I'm also on the NLSC, D43, and on YouTube, D43.
As for me, I'm Andrew in the forum and Andrew NLSC on X and Blue Sky. The NLSC is on X, Facebook, and Blue Sky at the NLSC. We're also NLSC Basketball on Instagram and Threads. We're on YouTube at NBA Live Series Center. And of course, keep a look to the NLSC itself, nba-live.com, for all things basketball gaming. So, thank you again for tuning in, and until next time, I'm Andrew.
And I'm Derek.
Merry Christmas, everyone.